Oh,
Just in relation to Hood and my partner being the manager of Hood Aerodrome, which I noticed is in the risk register.
it's in the risk register. Okay, thank you, Tina. All right, anything else? Thank you. Right, any apologies? Don't think we've got any apologies. Public forum, no public forum. Any late items? No late items. Thank you. And then we've got our minutes of our previous meeting and also the notes that are attached to that meeting. Can I have a mover for the receipt of those, please? Thank you. Can you see who's taking minutes? All right, so some of these names are a little bit confusing to Philip. Who's right?
It was Tim moved it and Tina, Councillor Nelson and Councillor Nixon.
Thank you.
I'll just rename mine, sorry.
That's all right. Now, David, have we got, now, who have we got here in terms of, hello, Susanna, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Very well, welcome.
Thank you.
So so what we might do is move the 2 quarterly reports on pages 457 through to 492. So our friends from Destination Wairarapa and Arotori can get back to work. Thank you for that. So that's on page 457. AJ, do you want to introduce this, or are you happy to take it as read?
Happy to take the report as read. Obviously, as the world has changed for our community, it has for our partners, and just to acknowledge the work that both Destination Wairarapa and Arotori have been doing in the background to stand up their organisations or to support our community with the Buy Local campaign, and I'll hand over to them. Thank you.
Thank you. So Susanna, thank you.
Thank you very much. Kia ora tātou. It's so nice to see you in a very different format now. And I just speak to the report. I'll be probably about 5 minutes and very happy to answer any questions. I've had some input from David Moriarty, the Deputy Chair, who is our financial expert, as you all know. We've had a very heavy loading of exhibition costs in the first quarter of the year with the 50th anniversary exhibition. When we last presented to MDC, our financials for the first quarter showed an adverse variance of about 16,000 against the budget. We advised then that we expected the adverse variance would correct over the balance of the year, and that we still expected to meet our budget for the full year, which was for an accounting deficit of nearly 41,000, meaning a cash loss of about 22,000, and which we planned to fund from our last remaining cash reserves. Now, with the 3 quarters of the year complete, that adverse variance has reversed as expected, and our results now show a favourable variance against the budget of $7,435 at the end of March 2020. The closing, of course, during March, April and May has impacted adversely on our operations, whereas our budget for the year assumed 38.2% of our income would be self-generated. We have, in fact, had no self-generated income during the lockdown period, and accordingly, we have qualified for the government assistance under the wage subsidy scheme. And this will defray some of our labour costs over the last quarter of the year. All our staff have been retained and are being paid the normal levels of wages, at least until the end of this current financial year. Staff have been working from home, remotely, and we've started, hopefully most of you, all of you would have seen this virtual Aratoi to connect with our community, and it's based on the collection, exhibitions, and also promoting local artists. With level 2 now in place, we have slowly begun to resume face-to-face activities, and our expectation is that our accounting result from normal operations will now be close to break even for the full year, which is favorable compared to our budget expectations. If a near break-even result is achieved, it will enable us to carry forward the small cash reserves we expected to deplete this year and apply them then to the following year, when we expect that the financial circumstances will make our budget for 2020 and 21 very difficult to achieve. We anticipate that it will be difficult to achieve the self-generated income we had budgeted for next year. And if our expectations are correct, then we will need to review our entire exhibition program, the operating hours, cost, and also staffing levels to compensate. For example, Trust House have indicated, we usually apply, so we have applied now, we apply in May for the May round. They have indicated that they have no funds. And as you know, Aratoi's exhibition program is funded entirely by monies received through Trust House. So we expect to find out more about this in June. The closure during lockdown and any inability to achieve our next year's budgeted self-generated income will impact adversely on our ability to meet several key performance indicators, which were agreed on the basis of the pre-COVID-19 environment. So we assume and hope that MDC will be understanding of this issue. Well, business as we know it has certainly changed for all of us, and we need to adapt the way we do operate. So we are constantly adjusting our exhibitions and the programs, the schedule, as the entire planning mechanism was disrupted, and there's great uncertainty around funding and timeframes. We have been able to communicate and present via our website and social media, but our system was not really set up to do so. In future or over the next few months, we want to invest more into online representation for our collection, for exhibitions, the retail space, and also the delivery of education programs and activities. This is new territory for us, and we don't have the right software in place, but we are working through some of these issues currently. So at this stage, we try and remain flexible and take it week by week and make adjustments or changes where we can. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Yes, Brent?
Susanna, first of all, congratulations on getting to where you've got over the last few weeks. I know it's been extremely difficult. What, if any, government funding or help is available for Aratoi outside of maybe that small business loan scheme that has been set up?
Very little, to be honest. I'm just in the I'm just applying for some funding through Creative New Zealand, but it's always very project based, and it's funding for projects that, for example, are finished by the 30th of September. So I will try and obtain some monies through them for online representation, but I'm not sure how successful we will be.
Okay, thank you. Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Tim.
Hi there, Susanna. You preempted one of my questions just about education. Is there a specific type of software that you're looking at for providing online lessons for schools?
It's not so much. We were looking at more at Zoom as well, as I think the schools have been using that quite a bit as well. But I think the issue is more sort of at the back in our house, really, that we haven't got the right collection management software in order to present these. So this would be much in terms of collections online, for example, and having a virtual exhibition representation, that would be sort of a collection management system that would be ideal in order to do that. So it's not so much the interface of Zoom and the likes, it's really sort of the actual setup, how we manage our collections and exhibition systems. So that is the issue, really.
Cool. Could you see yourselves? Oh, sorry, Susanna, go.
No, you go, Tim.
Could you see yourselves being like a gateway to other museums? Like I know museums everywhere have fantastic virtual programs, and it could be go through Aratoi to go to those particular places. Do you see what I mean?
No, not quite. In terms of
No.
virtual representation, you mean?
Yeah. So if you were the places like Tanui's school went to, if they wanted to explore other virtual museums, it could be something that you did, like you became the central point to gather up those sorts of resources. And then you're introducing schools to a much wider range of things outside of Aratoi as well.
Yeah, I guess that would be an option as well. So we have our educators and I, we've discussed things like also back of house tours and collection tours that we could via Zoom, for example, offer to schools as well, and have sort of look at certain works of art, certain taonga in our collection through that as well.
Cool. Thanks, Susanna.
Thank you,
Thank
Tim.
Tina?
Yeah, I was just wondering what your sort of plan is for the future with the reduction in income. You've got probably another tranche of wage subsidy that you can get, but it's going to be a really tough time. So what's your plan B?
We are looking at, this is why I say we are sort of going week by week. Unfortunately, I don't think we are eligible for the next round of wage subsidies, simply because of the rental grant we receive from Masterton Trustlands Trust, which is sort of part of our revenue. So it's a non-monetary sort of exchange, I guess. And I think at the moment, the whole exhibition program is on hold. I have sort of put all the plans for the next 3 months on hold. We'll close the Wesi wing. That's probably likely, simply because the heating of that church is costing us a lot of money, a lot of electricity and power. What we might do if we can't fill the main gallery, because that's usually the most expensive exhibitions that we sort of have in terms of setting up, we'll probably do smaller displays based on the collection. So that's really plan B. And the other one is to do more of this virtual Aratoi and have probably more frequently changed smaller displays of items from the collection.
Okay, has there been any thought given to an art buyback scheme? And I mean in terms of you've got some good significant works where people actually own them and then gift them back. So it's a way of cash injection into galleries. And has any thought been given to any sort of innovative ideas like that? And in terms of your reserves, you do have some reserves. I'm struggling to access some of my documents on my computer here at the moment. So how long are they going to last?
No, we haven't got any reserves anymore. These reserves came from the Aratoi Artist Auction that was held about 3 years ago. So we had about 20,000 that over the course of 3 years, every year was injected. I'm not sure what you mean by I didn't quite hear with the art.
Okay, so you have significant works and basically you put them up for auction. People buy them and then they actually gift them back to you. And they just put a little plaque underneath them so they own them. So it's actually a good way for people to actually invest in art. But it's actually always will hang in your gallery. So it's a way of sort of injecting cash into the gallery, changing the ownership in a way. But there's a contract that can be drawn up so that they basically own it, but they give it to you for a lifelong lease.
Yeah, I think it's quite controversial in terms of works from the collection. So we need to really think about our sort of role as kaitiaki for the collection. So I'm not quite sure. So there needs to be some more thinking around ideas like that. But we're certainly, putting all our hats on and trying to sort of see how we online raise money. The Friends want to do online raffles, for example, as well. We want to sort of have a better online representation of our shop. So that's what we are working on, changing our systems. So hopefully that will go live in about July.
Great. Thank you and good luck. It's going to be a tough time.
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah, Susanna, yeah, these must be very trying times for you, and I can see that it's not likely to get any better in the next little while. Presumably, though, that this is something that you know, every museum and an art gallery around the country are facing. Are you making collective approaches to the government for support?
Yes, on behalf, we're part of Museums Aotearoa, so and we are a member, and they are making sort of a collective approach on every museum's behalf. We are in a slightly different position than most museums and galleries in the country, though, because we are not part of the council. So those that are part of the council, they usually have more secure funding, whereas we are much more standalone and need to sort of raise at least a third of our income as self-generated income, which will be very problematic to raise.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Any? Yeah, sorry.
Philip, can I talk?
Yep. Yeah, yes. Sorry.
I just really wanted to commend you, Susanna, on this report. It's actually really disheartening to see that you've lost the Trust House funding that you were
Not sure yet, but it's likely, I think.
Yeah. But I'm just thinking, are you putting together a think tank on how, you know, other ways you can try and source other community grants and or philanthropic avenues as well? I think it's really important to keep you around, and certainly looking at other digital platforms to utilize to put yourselves out there is really important as well. So yeah, understand the hurt, and I wish you all the best. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tira. Yes, we certainly do this, and looking at sort of smaller but stuff funding that we might be able to sort of get together from the community or through smaller funding applications and grants. Thank you. Kia ora.
All right. Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Susanna. All the best for the future.
Thank you very much.
We might see you in person next time.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Right. Oh, sorry. Was there a couple of questions? Lynn, did you? Yep.
Just a wave goodbye, Philip.
Oh, it was a wave goodbye.
Oh,
Oh,
wave.
okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lynn. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Destination Wairarapa. Anna, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. This is a new group that Zoom meeting that I haven't experienced in the last 8 weeks. I feel like I've been on Zoom meetings left, right and centre with anybody and everybody, which is good, but also can be taxing, as I'm sure you're all aware. At the end of March, we were looking pretty good financially and results-wise. It would have been, end of March was probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks into the new role. And at the end of the March, I felt that I was slowly getting on top of things, and then COVID hit. And wow, what a change the world has been to everybody and everything. And tourism felt it first. So we have been running day after day, long hours, working hard to try and prevent our industry being completely decimated. There has been some wonderful glimmers of hope and silver linings, and much of it is popping up now, which is really pleasing to see. From a financial perspective for Destination Wairarapa, we were lucky to have received our Trust House funding literally days before lockdown happened. If we hadn't have received that funding, we were still in arrears roughly $19,000 in membership fees, which we, as soon as lockdown happened and the state of the economy became obvious, we chose not to chase those membership fees, given that many of those businesses were and will continue to struggle. It seemed certainly not the right thing to do. Roughly a third of our revenue is generated from alternative avenues to the councils in our MOU. And pretty much, as you all know, once lockdown happened, a third of that revenue disappeared off our books for the foreseeable future. When I looked at the budgeting for Destination Wairarapa, probably week 2, week 3, it all looked pretty bad. Checked it off with the accountant and they agreed. And so we applied for the wage subsidy for all members of our staff, which we have were awarded and very grateful for, because all of our eyesight staff were not able to work at all during that period of time. Actually, it's not true. For the first couple of weeks, we had them working behind the scenes. As you may recall, it seems like a long time ago, there was a lot of people, tourists still in the country, that we had to find accommodation for lockdown, and people who were choosing to self-isolate needed to stay away from their regular accommodation or addresses for whatever reason. So we were providing assistance there, feeding in through the emergency management system, and also people who were looking for refunds from bookings previously made, all that sort of stuff. But then after that, the eyesight staff were not able to work. So we were very grateful. We are very grateful, because we still have the subsidy working now, that that we got that support from the government. Also at that time, we're looking at commissions. So we earn commission through booking of accommodation through the eyesight network. That immediately got wiped off the table, and was not clear of how or when we would bounce back. I'm very pleased to report that as of last weekend, we have been getting bookings through accommodation providers in the region. And it's not just immediate bookings, it's forward bookings as well. Destination Wairarapa, we have been actively pushing with the Wellington market, more so this week, the appeal of the region, and it feels like it's starting to pay off now. Yes, Tina?
Tina.
Sorry.
Anna, I'd just like to commend you. I mean, I keep talking about first mover advantage and the recovery effort, and your response was textbook stuff. It put us in the Wairarapa in the foremost minds, top of mind, basically, for everyone in the Wellington region, which is really a reservoir of customers. And as my partner owns an Airbnb and is starting to get bookings, I echo the fact that people are actually starting to come back already. I just want to know whether you're comfortable with the level of support that you're getting from councils to date, and the Wellington Economic Development Strategy, which I know you've been part of. And I'm a very firm believer that we should be doing a larger campaign than probably even you're currently doing. And I just want to know how you feel about that.
Yeah, so typically Destination Wairarapa wouldn't be doing a Love Local campaign, because we're focused on bringing money into the region from outside of the region. But it became obvious with lockdown that it was what was required, and something that, because of the nature of the organisation that we are and the connections we have, we could do it. And we have a very small, nimble team that we could get it up and going quickly. And the Love Local campaign has been exceptionally well received. There's been a lot of goodwill that has come out of Love Local, Love Wairarapa, the sense of community. When I talked about silver linings, one thing I noticed was the more we started talking about loving local, and because we were locked down specifically to this geographical region, there was no other people, no other visitors here with us in our Wairarapa bubble. There has been and is a really strong pride in the region, I feel, that has resulted from this. And I'd like to think that Destination Wairarapa played a part in focusing that sentiment. And I think there's an incredible opportunity to continue and build on that sense of pride and that creation of our own identity, not just as known as a region or a suburb part of Wellington City or north of Wellington City. It's an opportunity to claim a position in our own right, and a sense of pride and sense of strength of our own. That's the feeling I got from it just starting this work. So it'd be really nice to continue and build on that.
Thank you, Anna. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Gear then.
The curse of the unmute. Kia ora.
Yeah.
Hey, fantastic to see what's been going on so far. Great to see a lot more interest in those wanting to come and visit the region. Have you had much from locals that maybe are choosing to holiday here, whether they be from Masterton going to South Wairarapa or vice versa, or is it mainly from those outside the region?
Funnily enough, funny you should ask that, actually, because I was talking with my husband, and I think it's something that it might be happening where locals are wanting to holiday in their own region, because we were just talking about last night that we quite like to go to Tora Beach and rent a batch and just hang out and look at the sea for a couple of days. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there's a few people who would quite like to have a holiday in their own region, looking at a space that doesn't look like we've looked at for the last 8 weeks. Certainly the interest from Wellington. So the campaign that we launched yesterday has had an incredible reach via social media. We've had the biggest response to a competition in the first day, like within the first 8 hours. The amount of entries into our competitions from our competition, the 4 of them from Wellington, and we haven't even rolled out all of the options there, has been phenomenal. We're really excited about the traction that this campaign can create, but even locals who've got in contact with me who really loved the campaign themselves and said, you know, some of those that family package or the girls package, we really need to try that one out ourselves because it sounds fantastic. So there's a great deal, a lot of really feel good vibes locally and people coming into the region about what we have to offer, what our natural assets are, the people that are here. It's almost, dare I say it, a good time to be promoting tourism in this region.
Cool, thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anna. Well done on the Great Wairarapa escape. I think it's, as you've just alluded to, going to be a really good, really good promotion for our region. I just had a quick look because I'm sure I read it somewhere. So I was interested in the work how you're working with Wellington NZ.
Yeah.
And Positively Wellington. I don't know. I'm sure I read it somewhere.
Yes.
So I apologise. I just had a quick look and can't see it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how because that's extremely important at this time.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could give us some feedback about that.
Sure. The relationship with Wellington NZ. So my understanding and from my experience dealing with them over the last few weeks, from a tourism marketing perspective, they're a very strong alliance. My understanding is that we pay them $25,000, I think it is, a year to be part of an international marketing program, which obviously whenever they go overseas, Australia or wherever, then Wairarapa is automatically included in their brand proposition because of that, but also out of region. So Greater Wellington region, when they're talking in that sense to Auckland, come from Auckland to Wellington, we are also included in that relationship. So it's always been there. There's a formal, this is contract of this is what we do for you, this is what you get back. But my understanding is it's more than that. They go, it's a real partnership. It's a real, they assist us with anything. And recently with COVID, they have been very generous with their time and their expertise. And if we've needed extra something or other, then they've been able to help in an advisory role, certainly not money or anything like that, but making sure that we're connected up in the right places. What we've also been doing recently is more probably traditional economic development side of things, looking at the jobs, capability building, all that sort of stuff that's more about the development of the product, not so much of focusing on the marketing of it. And I personally think Wellington NZ, from their business support side of things, we have been able to tap in to a lot. They have really stood up in that sense, and we have benefited as a region a great deal in the seminars that they've run that's focused on tourism, or pivoting your business into social media. They've done some work on that, and we've put people, made sure that our region, anyone who was interested in that was available to see those seminars, and if not, that they could download them, all the information that they've sent, voucher systems. We've had a couple of key people in our region who are consultants in the tourism world. We've got them listed on the Regional Business Partnership Program so that they can assist our people in our region with professional advice and at the same time be paid for that. So it's not just a pro bono situation here. So the relationship with Wellington NZ, they've really impressed me on both the tourism and the marketing aspect, but also the business development side of things as well. They've been very available and very accommodating to us.
Okay, that's good to hear, and so they should be, given that they get nearly $500,000 from the Wairarapa, so they should be helping us. They have a responsibility to help us. So I was just trying to gauge how, that they are doing that, and it sounds like they are. My final question is just around the financials. It's been a bone of contention for me, and I'm going to raise it again, that in the financials, the total budget column is never there. So it's always year to date. So when I look at it to get a feel for where you are heading to year end, or where you're forecasting where you may end up for year end, I don't get a good sense of it. So, I mean, I know that you're just new into the role. I don't know whether your system can do that, but even if it has to be handwritten, and it does help. To get a picture moving forward.
I absolutely understand that. So one of the new things, so this is all Xero reporting, and I've just followed the templates which were there. And I have to admit that Xero it was something that I had to train on, and I have been training on to understand. And these formats, I don't really understand myself. I find them very confusing. I'm quite relieved that you've said what you've said, because it gives me the opportunity to change how it looks and how it feels. So I take that on board. Thank you.
If I can just give it a little bit of advice on that, you can actually export that profit and loss to an Excel page, and then just copy the budget in and then print that. That's the simplest way of doing it. I've got to do it for another trust I sit on as well. It's the easiest. Just a heads up to your accountant is something they can quickly and easily do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other further questions? I just just a quick question. What do you know the overseas visitors compared with national visitors, where it was up until March of this year as a percentage?
So overseas, it's only 13% or something, very small percentage of the market. It's not 33, it might be 16%. Not a great deal. And most of those Australians. So if there was to be a Trans-Tasman bubble, then that would give us the cream on the top. But most of our, over 80% of our market is domestic. We appeal, well, our offering really appeals to the domestic market in many ways, many segments. I know that Tourism New Zealand, they're doing insights work at the moment in the domestic tourism sense, and mid next month, they'll have an idea of exactly what that segmentation looks like. I'm pretty certain there'll be a wine and food, there'll be a nature, and there'll be a family, and we tick those boxes quite nicely, as you would have seen with our, if you've seen the Great Escape campaign that we've got. We're anticipating that those are the types of packages that Tourism New Zealand will find appealing for the segmentation.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Tim?
Just one quick one, following on from Philip's one. Where do you may already have said this, but where do the tourists from New Zealand generally come from? Have you got a breakdown for that?
Yes. So it's 44% from Wellington. I think off memory it's 12 from Manawatu. Then I think it's 6 from Hawke's Bay, and it might be 6 from Auckland. Hawke's Bay and Auckland tend to change depending on the month and what activities are on. A lot of our immediate domestic, so when you add up those numbers from our interregional, so Wellington, Manawatu and Hawke's Bay, they're right next door to us. And then when it comes to Auckland, that is often driven by events. So the likes of Toast Martinborough, Wings over Wairarapa, the balloons, they might come down here for the Easter holiday. Those sorts of things will drive the Auckland market here too. Oh, food and wine as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Anna. Any further questions? Okay, thank you for that, Anna, and all the best for the coming months. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully on site at our next meeting.
Absolutely. I just want to say that the beginning of lockdown tourism was looking pretty bleak, but I'm feeling really confident that if we can get through winter, come spring, summer, we're not going to bounce back to exactly where we were, but I think we're going to come in pretty close, and I feel very, very confident for the industry. We've just got to get between here and there and make sure our key focus really is making sure that those key tourism businesses hold on to their staff for as long as possible, that they're open for business, and then when people start coming back, we're able to scale up appropriately.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you and all the best. Right, now can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 547, please? Harriet, did you get those two there? I think the two T's.
It's Tito and Tina.
Thank you. All right, all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Right, now thank you for that. Now if we go back to audit engagement and audit proposal letters, thank you, John, for sitting in the background, and David. That's on pages 411 to 432. Unfortunately, John's already had me this morning. David, are you going to show yourself as well, or are you going to stay in the dark?
Harriet has to unmute, liven up my video. She's in control.
Oh dear. Right.
Here we go.
Oh. Floor's yours, David and John.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. The letters from John are a formality that keep the process going in terms of having our accounts audited. and the coming financial year end, 30th of June, the annual report for that year will be subject to this audit process. So these letters are there for your information, but it's a good opportunity for John to give us an update on the impacts of COVID-19 on the audit timetable. I think that's all I wanted to add to the report.
Okay, thank you, David. John?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, the letters are pretty standard in terms of the previous years. Probably just to note in the audit proposal letter around the fees, this is one of the sectors where the Office of the Auditor General has had a specific approach due to the impacts of COVID in raising fees. For Masterton, it's not particularly relevant because our audit fee was was pretty much in line with required audit effort over the last few years. But they've limited the fee increase to 1.5% for the current year, which I think for some councils who could have ended up with a 15 or 20% increase for the current year, I'm sure that will be quite welcome. And the letter also indicates, that even going forward into next year, there won't be a significant impact for Masterton. The fees are pretty much in line with the audit effort we've been having over the past. We do indicate in there where some of those pressures for Masterton have been over the last few years. There's additional hours due to meeting and changes to standards around the valuations and that kind of thing. So it gives a little bit of background about where some of the fee pressures are, but not a significant impact in terms of the audit effort that we've had to date. In terms of the COVID, there's some uncertainty around how the next few months will turn out, even with the lockdown now even with us now moving away from the lockdown. As far as we know, all the statutory reporting deadlines remain as they are. So we'll be focusing our audit efforts to make sure that we're still able at this stage to be able to report on time by the end of October. It seems a pretty hard bar at the moment to get over to move any of those deadlines out. In terms of the impact on the audit, we have in our audit plan to management indicated in there that there's a possibility that our audit approach might have to take some impacts of COVID into account. We won't know what those are until we've finished our interim audit and some more planning around it. Some entities are getting impacted already in different ways from a revenue, mainly from revenue basis or having to cut down operations. There's staff impacts from that. There's, I guess, prioritization in terms of activities, which could result in some functions not being performed or prioritized over others, which could impact, for example, your non-financial reporting, or your controls and working remotely. So we'll assess those as part of our interim and our planning. If anything does come through from our interim work that indicates the need to do additional work because of COVID, then we'll communicate that through an amended plan at a later stage.
Thank you for that, John. Any questions of John or David? Tina?
Any moves, and I'm sorry, my internet was unstable, so I was just trying to sort it out. So if this has been covered, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to know whether you guys had actually considered dropping your fees in line with a lot of corporates at the moment in terms of what's happening with COVID.
So not in terms of dropping the fees. The OAG has for the local government sector, limited the fee increase for the current year to 1.5%. There was a sector fee repositioning exercise done. So there's an indication last year that, because we did a fee setting for last year, it was a 1-year fee set. There was an indication that this year would be the first step up for those councils where the fees are not aligned with the current audit efforts. So there were some councils who would have had a bigger hit this year had the OAG not limited the increase to the 1.5%. For Masterton in particular, it's our audit effort and the budget has pretty much been aligned in the past. So there's no pressure on us from wanting to increase the fee for Masterton Council. But at the same time, it would have been slightly higher this year, maybe an extra % due to inflation. So they've limited the increase for this year to 1.5. So instead of a 2 or 3% increase, it's sitting at 1.5%, and you'll expect a similar increase next year, but no reduction in the fees at this stage that I've heard discussed.
Any other questions? John, just in terms of, I'm not sure whether you got the agenda in front of us, but in the major reasons for changes in hours, there's another 10 hours. It's on section of your letter. That's on page 428 of the agenda. You talk about rates and recent court cases of highlighted risks. I thought the cases that have actually been gone to court have actually all gone in council's favour and potentially reduced the risks for council. I'm not aware of any court cases that have actually gone against councils in terms of rate setting requirements. Can you just enlighten us on that, please?
Yes, I think those as a result of some of those court cases, the risks around rates and the legislative processes and the council processes that you need to go through to be able to levy them, there's a real risk that if those processes aren't followed or done correctly, there's exposure to councils having not being able to set their rates. So I guess as a response to those risks identified, there was quite a lot of standard work that was put together that we have to complete on an annual basis to make sure that from the rates resolution and all the processes that have been followed that everything is in line. So I guess the amount of work that came out of that process, although you say the decisions didn't go their way, it did highlight the risk to us and the need for us to make sure when we're issuing the opinion we have covered off all of those processes around the legality of the rates.
So just to clarify, so these hours, are these another 10 hours anticipated on what you did last year, or is it the variation from last year? I'm just a little bit confused about that, the additional 37 hours.
So the 37 hours is going back over a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
So every year you'll see like the actual fees are over what the budget is. So we absorb, we normally set our fees over a 3-year period. So any changes that happen during that period, we'll typically absorb that fee, and every now and then there's an opportunity to reset the fees where within the sector where there's a problem identified. And I think across a lot of the councils there is an issue, not with Masterton specifically, but then those are some of the drivers over the last few years. If we look back, we have some of the changes come from accounting requirements or risk requirements, and just to give an idea of what's driving the change in hours. Some of the changes in hours, we'll continue to absorb those from Audit New Zealand side. So we haven't put all the hours in there. That's pretty much just an estimate from our side if we look back 3-4 years or more.
Tina, you got a further question?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I'm actually sort of feeling like we're being sort of shafted a little bit, and it's on the basis that you guys have almost got a monopoly. And we're seeing a lot of organisations showing a lot of fiscal and moral responsibility around charges. And so what you're offering doesn't really quite meet my standard for that. So just be interested to know what you could do. I'm just not feeling the love, I suppose, in a way. And really, this is where everyone has to share a bit of pain. And I know going through the process that we are at the moment around our costs and trying to reset rates, that we are certainly feeling a lot of pain, and so are our ratepayers. So I think it's time for organisations like you to share some of that pain as well.
I think the AOG did look at it from a sector basis and say, that limit the increase. So I think that's where, there has been some I guess, recognition from their side about the pressures that councils are going to face. So limiting the increase for this year, for some councils, that would mean a potential reduction in the fee for, as far as I understand, between 10-20%, what it would have been, down to 1%. So Masterton won't feel that because there wasn't any fee pressure. I guess the audit budget would have been slightly higher for you had that cap of 1.5% not been in place. Some of those additional hours, when you see the types of things we're talking about, it's that whole public sector risk coming through, especially around the sensitive expenditure, the integrity type expenses. There's a lot of examples in New Zealand over the last few years in the public sector around inappropriate expenses, and we react to that in terms of our risk assessments as well. We need to get, that's part of our audit. We need to get that evidence over. We still have to complete all that work, to be able to share our reports. And I guess for this year, although those hours are going to be in there, we're going to do that work. We're not going to bill for those.
Yeah, I mean, I just couldn't support it. I just don't think you're giving us enough, and I feel really strongly about that. Okay. So no, you won't get any support from me to sign this.
I think if we're going to, if the council wants to take it further, the appropriate form is actually the Office of the Auditor General actually limits all the fees. And I think if the council wants to pursue that, that's actually not necessarily the service provider. Their fee is capped by the Office of the Auditor General. And if council wants to take it further, I suggest that it takes it up with the Office of the Auditor General. That's my suggestion. I noticed.
I'm more than happy to move in that regard. I really think this is, in the words of an old friend of mine, taking a piss, really.
Yeah, I think that's council's prerogative. The contact details for the OAG person is in the letter if there's concerns about the fee. From our side as well, I can't promise to reduce anything. It wouldn't, one approach for Masterton wouldn't be suitable for the sector as a whole. But I think raising concerns, like you're saying, if you feel strongly about it, then that's your prerogative to raise that issue.
Lynn, do you want to comment since your name's on the engagement letter?
I understand the frustration that Tina's raising. I mean, none of us like paying the audit fees. I think I suppose my sense of unfairness is about a lot of the councils, I think as John has alluded to, who have got away with not paying as much as what they should have given the hours spent, and possibly could have been looking at a 10 or 15% increase this year, that they're being held at 1.5. So, that's sort of unfair in its own right. I think if there's any pushback, it needs to come from the National Council of Local Government New Zealand. It'll be a nationwide issue. It's not just for Masterton. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Everybody's feeling a lot of pain. We've just had 2 of our service providers that are feeling a lot of pain as well. That are wanting more money because of what they're delivering. So, we have to be a bit balanced in this. So, yeah. Interested in what others may think, Philip.
Thank you for that. Did anyone else got any comments? Okay. So we actually have a recommendation. Do I have a mover for that recommendation, or does then Tina wants to actually move an alternative recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? I'll second it. Any further discussion on the recommendation? Okay. Therefore, no further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Thank you. Do you want your vote recorded? Thank you. So it's Tina and I was going to say BJ. No? want their votes recorded as against the recommendation. Thank you. Resolution. Thank you.
Can I suggest, Chair, that that we ask the Chief Exec may be able to write a letter, or actually we contact our through to National Council and just raise our concerns, just to see whether there's a feeling across the country about this. I mean, I'm approving it because I don't believe there will be changes, but that doesn't mean we can't but try to see if nationally there isn't, you know, if every council's saying this, then you never know, we might get a bit of traction. So maybe we can get a letter done to our national, and we can raise it. I'm quite happy to raise it with National Council members, just to see if it's something that they're prepared at a National Council level to discuss and take further.
Okay,
sorry, Phil. Can I just ask one more question, mate? What was it you were asking that Tina would do? What was that process?
Oh, so she could actually have moved an amendment.
Yeah.
To the recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy with Lynn's approach. I think that's the way to go. But I'd like us to be the first in the line to say, nah, sorry, we need some movement on this.
I agree.
Okay. All right. I think that's. I endorse Lynn's suggestion. So if we can just ask the Chief Executive to draft that letter and contact LGNZ.
Okay. And just from my understanding, Philip, is it the level of the fees for the audit that's the concern, or the fact that the council has to pay for the fees?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is from the discussion, there are councils whose fees should have actually gone up more than the 1.5%. And because Masterton was a good council, it didn't actually have any fee pressure, but our fees still went up by 1.5% compared with someone else, and we won't name them. Their fee potentially could have gone up 10% to reflect the full costs. They're in fact getting a subsidy of 9% from our good behaviour.
Okay, so it's around that decision to hold it.
I think that's the message that I took from the discussion.
That's right.
I think Tina, I got a thumbs up from Tina.
Yeah, we're rewarding bad behaviour or bad councils that are not providing the information in a timely or whatever way, and you're having to spend more time to it. We're rewarding that.
Yeah. So the reasons why some other councils' fees may be different. There's a lot of things that input into that. There could be growth in those councils. There could be changing the nature of the operations through more complexities, like CCOs or whatever. There's a range of reasons which impact the audit fee, and it's not only the client delivery side. It could be specific. There could be reasons why council's fees are different.
Yeah, but even if their fees, there is legitimate fees why they should be different. That's even actually strengthens the case why their fees actually should be going up.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've had enough discussion on that. Thank you for your attendance, John, and we look forward to seeing your audit opinion in due course.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Right. Our next item on the agenda is the Treasury Management Report. David, a lot of track changes in the report. Do you want to just guide us through in terms of the key highlights as to the key changes?
Thank you, Philip. Yes, I will. And we have Brett Johansson available to speak to some of the technical aspects of the liability policy and the changes that we've suggested that are made to the document, mostly to allow for changing definitions of LGFA debt. There's Brett coming on the call now. So in terms of the overall report, we're required to review the Treasury management policy that incorporates liability policy and investment policy. It's at least every 3 years. So there are a number of changes that you'll see in the marked up document, and that we've purposely put the marked up document in there so you see what those changes are. It doesn't change the basis or significance of the policies themselves. It just allows more compliance with agencies that look at councils' debt management and make sure that we're abiding by the industry standard practices. It's a conservative policy in many respects, in both the investment and the interest rate risk management controls that we have in place. We're looking to make sure we don't incur shocks in our interest, that if the interest rate markets change, then we have enough stability for predictability in our costs going forward, and the policy parameters are set out in this document. It may be best if Brett makes a comment about the LGFA changes and requirements and relating to credit limits, even though our council, we don't have a credit limit, but the financial markets do regard the financial controls and council policies as one of the ways that they assess our credit worthiness.
Yes, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Brett Johansson here. Look, in terms of the liability management investment policy, just probably some broad comments. The construct of the policy still remains, and what continues to be consistent with the legislation in terms of the content of the policies. The changes that have been recommended, one in the first instance, changes that are happening from the LGFA. So the LGFA, the Local Government Funding Agency, is making some changes in terms of how it lends. And at the moment, it lends directly to councils. It's providing the flexibility for the LGFA to lend directly to CCOs and CCTOs. So what we have done as part of our review of many council policies is put this framework within the liability management policy, so that the policy is enduring over the next 3 years, should council be in a position where it wish to lend directly to a CCO, CCTO, or that CCO or CCTO borrow directly from the LGFA. So in some ways, we're just providing the framework in which the council will be able to manage that process and ensure the governance is there should that occurrence or eventuality happen. Like in all instances, it's going to require approval from council, because if a CCO or CCTO did want to borrow directly from the LGFA, they'd have to become a member of the LGFA, and that will require council's approval. And then also, as you know, if a CCO was going to borrow directly from the LGFA, would have to have some support from council. So really, it was just really putting the framework in place and the belts and braces from a governance perspective into the policy to manage a future occurrence of that happening. That's probably one of the key changes, which is motivated by the LGFA's funding policies changing. The other ones are relating to your debt funding limits. and your interest rate limits. Your debt funding limits are important, and they ensure that there's a spreading and smoothing of risk. I think one of the key objectives of successful Treasury management is not to have a concentration of risk at any point in time. And you can probably see in this current market environment where the market can be shocked quite quickly and quite easily, and for the best of intentions, it's very hard to anticipate when that's going to happen. So the policy is there to protect council, as David says. So council has a steady debt program in terms of its upcoming maturities. It also has access to liquidity or access to cash, and it certainly gets that through its committed bank facilities. So what we're suggesting there in terms of the funding maturity limits is not compromising the spreading and smoothing approach to your debt management. And council has got a very good spreading of its debt maturities. But what we're suggesting there is that there's a little bit more flexibility in the time bands. This policy that you've got at the moment has been with council for a number of years, and it would have been pre the local government funding agency. And certainly the debt markets and the access to liquidity from the council sector and council has matured a lot. If you think about the LGFA now, it's got over 11 billion of debt raising, and it performed very well through this most recent crisis with COVID-19. And I have to say that the local government sector is much better placed to what it was 10 years ago with the global financial crisis. So the LGFA, as you know, you can borrow up to 2033, and you can borrow up to any term up to 2033. And the LGFA has a regular tender program that you can choose to enter into or not, depending on your underlying debt refinancing and debt raising requirements. So this change in the debt maturity policy gives you a bit more flexibility in that 3 to 5 year time band, sort of extends it out to 4 years. So it provides a bit more flexibility in terms of your existing debt as it's rolling into the shorter periods, and also gives you a bit more flexibility in being able to sort of target specific maturities based on underlying pricing of debt, but also ensures you're getting a smoothing of your debt maturities as you require. So it's a recommendation that we're recommending to all our council clients, but also importantly that maximum limit in the next 3 years of 60% stays. So in terms of thinking about your debt and your liquidity management in terms of the next 3 years, that maximum amount of debt you can have is still maintained. It's just giving you a bit more flexibility for those management of your debt maturities beyond 3 years. So that was a suggestion that we've made. And the other one is the interest rate policy. So this is a change to your interest rate risk management framework. And what we've seen over the last sort of 5-10 years is a structural change in interest rates globally, and that's flown through to New Zealand, of course. And the materiality and sensitivity of a 1% movement of interest rates today is very different to what it was 5-10 years ago. So we don't have interest rates of 6%. We've got to go up to as high as 9%. They're now down at, below 1% if you look at the official cash rate. And so the whole global situation is that central banks in the past have been trying to suppress inflation and contain it. Now they're trying to stimulate it. So there's been a real structural change in interest rates. And so we have recommended this policy as we've done for other councils. One of the reasons for that is that the materiality and sensitivity of interest rate risk. Also aligning our interest rate management approach to, I suppose, the intergenerational medium-term perspective on debt. So debt is intergenerational, and we wanted to sort of align the interest rate management to more the medium-term outlook for your debt forecast, because the current interest rate policy looks at your 12-month debt figure. It doesn't assume anything beyond 12 months. And we would say generally the debt forecasting capabilities of the sector and of councils sort of improved over the last 10 plus years. One, there's a bit more and better understanding of what the carry forwards mean and how does that influence debt forecasts. And also the hedging of your future interest rate will be very much hinged against your debt forecast. But rest assured that your maximum amount of hedging or interest rate protection you can put in place reduces as we go further into the future. And that's because there's obviously more uncertainty around debt forecasts. And your debt forecasts very much aligned to your LPT forecasts, those forecasts that you're consulting against. There will be some probably tweaks and changes as we go through the current year and have a better understanding in terms of how the capital program is flowing. And also obviously as we move into the annual planning process and a better understanding in terms of what near-term changes may well be happening around debt, given what may have been consulted on around the LTP. So the interest rate forecast policy still has that spreading and smoothing approach. It's one of those key objectives to remove that concentration risk, but it does give you a bit more flexibility. So a bit more flexibility for management to be managing that longer term interest rate risk. And that minimum percentage does come down to 40%. And that is really sort of driven around that materiality and sensitivity to interest rate risk, given the fundamental level of interest rates today is very different to what it was 10, 15 years ago when the policy was originally put in place. So I suppose those are some of the high level comments I just wanted to make you aware of in terms of changes to the policy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johansson, for that. It's a long time since I've seen you. I think just a little bit of history here for the members. Mr. Johansson, I first met him in would have been 1998, when councils could actually have their first Treasury policies, and some of the wording here looks like 1998 stuff. So that's how long it's been around. Now, questions. Yes, thank you.
Question. Thank you very much for that. On page 450, I've just got a naive question that I have no idea what a forward start period is on a swap and collar strategy is. So I've got absolutely no idea what that means. So if you could just layman terms it on me, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Yes, I think good question. And yeah, when it comes to Treasury management, it does get quite technical. And there's two ways of managing your interest rate exposure. So I think about variable mortgage rates and fixed mortgage rates. So the interest rate instrument that you're talking about is a fixing type of instrument. So it removes that floating rate risk and provides a fixing of that interest rate cost. So you have some certainty around when you're setting your borrowing costs for the annual plan and the LTP, which goes out 10 years, you've got some of that risk known. So it doesn't matter what happens globally or what happens domestically around inflation, you've sort of locked yourself into a known cost. So that helps in terms of the way you're planning and ultimately striking rates. So it is the Act talks to it as an incidental arrangement. Another name for that is a derivative. And it just gives you the flexibility to forward manage that risk
Okay,
in the future. Okay, hopefully that
Thank you
helps.
very much for that. Yeah, I had no idea what that actually meant,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest.
And I totally understand where everyone's coming from, because when I first got started into the debt management, I got totally confused as well. It's only because I had to do it for so long in a previous life that I actually understood. You know, you've got all sorts of horrible technology like swaptions, which is the option to have a swap.
Yep.
And then you've got floors and collars. So and it's like a ceiling, and you know, there's all sorts of funny lingo. Unless you're deeply involved in Treasury, it becomes like speaking worse than a Cantonese. It's actually like speaking an old Latin. Unless you're actually experienced in speaking Latin, you've got no idea what it actually means. So look, feel free to ask David to explain it all. If Brett's here, ask him about what it actually means. I'm sure David understands what a swaption is. If he doesn't, well, I'll have words with him after. But that's just the nature of the beast. Any other questions? I've got Tim.
Just thanks, Philip. Just from a layman's perspective, I'm probably a little bit with Te Reo, and a lot of this is it really does go above my head, even though I read the reports quite carefully. Is there like a recommended pathway that someone like I could go through to get a greater understanding of a report like this when I actually read it, that you could suggest?
What and I'm going to ask the chief executive to pop online. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm working with the chief executive is a risk workshop in the future.
Yeah.
And I think maybe as part of that, Kath, we might actually want to have a half hour talking about from David, how he manages his debt and what instruments he uses to manage his debt, and what instruments are available that he's not yet using to manage debt. And I think when you actually see it in that setting, a lot of the terminology that's being used here will become more transparent. And, you know, you'd actually understand, you know, how you would actually use that. And I'm sure Mr. Johansson might want to pop in by his Zoom or something and contribute to that as well. I mean, it is confusing, and if you don't understand it, it does come with some risk for council.
I mean, it's comforting to know, like I see Tina seems to have a lot of confidence with this, and I think Lim is an accountant and you got this team around you, but just from personal reassurance, it would be good to do that.
Yep.
And David did some really good presentations in our induction. I thought they were excellent, David, but probably just revisiting those sorts of things as well. Thank you.
I think it's a really good idea around having that risk workshop, because this is all about risk and certainty from a council perspective about our way forward, which would be quite different if this was your own business and you were taking more risks and didn't need that certainty. So it is about risk. I think that would be really useful.
Okay, got a thumbs up. Any other questions?
It wasn't a question, Philip, but I'm more than happy to find some simple guides as well and share them, because while we can go through it in a workshop, some people like to sit back and digest information as well, and then do the live examples. So we'll have a look for some simple guides to Treasury management.
And I'm sure PwC can help.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And also we run an introductory Treasury management course.
Well, we'll just have the brochure, the short version.
Yeah, happy to do a workshop with council as well.
Yeah. I've got one question on page 441, section 4 of the policy. It's talking about principles of Treasury activity. It's the third, I think it's a new bullet point. David, you're saying all debt raised for a specific activity or project. So that's new. So why have we actually put that clause in? So does that actually stop council from managing its debt from a corporate cash flow, and therefore we actually have to borrow for specific projects? Can you just help me through that?
I think we were looking to codify current practice, which has been that we set an annual plan or a long-term plan, and we define what projects we are going to do and how we're going to fund those projects. And those that are going to be debt funded listed in that plan, and we will borrow when we do the project, and sheet home the interest cost and the repayments for that debt against the activity that we've raised the money for. So if we build a water treatment plant, the cost of the water supply includes the cost of the funding of the debt to build the plant. And that's the principle that the council has used in all of its debt raising to date. And we haven't used a corporate debt model where there's a lump of borrowing that is allocated across all council activities. So we wanted to codify in the current policy the what council has done up till now. And it doesn't mean to say we can't change to a corporate-based approach, but for transparency and setting of rates for services, we believe that the cost of debt funding of a service, the rates should reflect the cost of the debt. If we've had to use debt, does that answer your question?
It does, and I'm just concerned about the wording in there. I would actually say the wording in there would actually restrict council from wanting to use a corporate approach if it wanted to. It's more constraining, right? That wording, the fact that you say all debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of.
Can I come in, Philip?
Absolutely.
It's quite simple. All debt that is. There's a that missing.
Ah, thank you.
So if we needed to draw on an overdraft, then we want to have the ability to draw on an overdraft for work cash flow purposes.
Yep.
Which would be debt.
Okay. So, I'm happy with that suggestion. Thank you, Kath. Right. So just happy that we put that word in that makes a lot more sense. Lynn, you've got a comment?
I just want to go back to the corporate model again. And I think we've discussed this before, David, and I mean, not here and now. It might be useful to have that again through the LTP, because Philip, from your experience, I mean, is there some councils that do it, some that don't, and it's understanding the disadvantages and advantages of both of the different models? I'd be interested to know what your experience has been.
Thank you for that. I have experienced both models, and I've got to be careful here that I don't lean towards my bias. I think, as you rightly say, each has advantages and disadvantages. And I think we actually probably be good at some stage to actually explore the advantages and disadvantages of each model. I think that would be a good place to start. Neither is right, neither is wrong. Kath?
I think the correct place to explore that is as part of revenue and financing as well, and the implications for our rating policies, because it's one lever to go that way, but if your other policies are working against it, you'll have some significant issues.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that, Kath, but I think it's quite a good discussion to have so that councillors all understand that it does affect other policies, most certainly.
So I think we need to have those conversations together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good leading into the LTP that we do, so that councillors, when they make the decisions around all of that, have a good understanding of the pros and cons and what happens if we do X, Y, and Z, 2 rates or whatever, because it will impact on it in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it does impact on your revenue and financing policies. A whole lot of things you need to take notice of. It's not just a simple, we're going to have a corporate model, we're going to have this model. That's part of the advantages and disadvantages. I think the big disadvantage of the corporate model is it actually takes quite a bit of management in terms of process and reporting as well. So each has advantages and disadvantages. Are there any other comments, questions on our Treasury management policy update? On that basis,
Philip, can I just point out a couple of things that are in there? We haven't talked about the investment side of the policy, having been through the liability ones. On page 436 and 437, there's a little bit of commentary around whether the council has any appetite to change its risk and invest in things other than just corporate bonds and term deposits when we have surplus cash. So we have somewhere between $14 and $16 million of funds invested, and we have in this investment policy requirements to only invest it in secure investments, and secure I mean corporate bonds, bank bonds, government bonds, or term deposits, and other investments such as shares are not allowed unless they have a strategic benefit to the council, and for example the shares in LGFA are one of those strategic investments. But broadening to include some shares in the council's investment portfolio would increase risk, but it could increase returns as well. And we just wanted to flag a debate with elected members as to whether there is any risk appetite for allowing some share investments or different asset classes in the investment portfolio, and that may be at a very low level. And that's one. And then the second one was this small changes in the investment counterparty limits that we've suggested, where we want ANZ call funds to be part of the council's transactional banking. So there's changes that we've made, requested to be made in the detail of the investment policy to not be so restrictive in where we put our bank funds when we have funds to invest.
Lynn?
I was just going to ask, really, David and Kath, through the chair, whether this is not a discussion we should be having as part of our LTP debate, or you wanting to have it now. I just wanted clarity on that. And, you know, because there's big risk to this. Maybe I'm getting too old, but I remember the impact that it had in the share market crash in the 80s, and I was working for Audit New Zealand, and hospital boards and what have you all got stung. But yeah, I just wonder if now is the right, I think it would be better to have it as a council around the whole risk thing as well, because there's a lot of...
I actually agree with you, and actually I was going to take it up a click. If council wants to move into having other investments, the first time it really needs to debate that is in its financial strategy, because the financial strategy, if you look at, and unfortunately this is the joy of working on your full computer, you can actually quickly bring up the act in front of you, section 101A(3), which says that what the financial strategy must do, it actually in D, you've got to specify the local authority's objectives for holding and manage financial investments in equity securities. So before we can actually have it in our Treasury or investment policy, we need to have that debate as part of your financial strategy. And if it's not there at the moment, you probably can't do it. So I haven't got your financial strategy in front of me, but I think I agree with you, Lynn. It's part of your LTP discussion. And so your financial strategy, I think, is one of the first cabs off the rank in terms of your LTP process. David, David or Kath got any comments to make on that?
My only one is that we are in a policy cycle. It doesn't mean to say we can't change the financial strategy in the LTP cycle and revisit the Treasury management policy following that.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments on the policy? Tim?
Would this mean for this particular policy, it's aligned with the long-term plan, David? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, yes. But it's not a yes/no decision today, or you know, it can go around a number of times, and any level of advice that you need before making a change, we can seek professional guidance. I'm not a financial advisor in terms of investment and what shares to buy, and we would make sure that we are treading carefully in any of those decisions.
Thanks, Dave. Sorry, Philip, I should have gone for you then.
No, that's we're in challenging times here, and I'm using first names and all sorts of other things. It's quite a challenging environment. So yes, I'm not going to stand on ceremony on through a Zoom meeting. That's for sure. It's about having.
Don't worry, Philip. I'll give you a lesson on how to pronounce my name properly.
Thank you very much. Right, in person later. All right. Mr. Johansson, did you want to make any comments?
Oh, look, just in terms of the wider conversation around asset types and asset classes, I think that absolutely right. It has to sit the financial strategy, but be very clear on your objectives in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Because at the moment, it's a very much it's a portfolio which is very much driven around a fixed income return and cash. And as soon as you move into growth assets like equities, you need to really change your lifespan objectives so that you can, you're looking for long-term capital growth. And typically that would be 15 years plus. So it is an intergenerational investment decision when you're sort of moving into a portfolio which has got growth assets like equities in. And the experience of the last couple of months can show you how volatile share markets can be as risk sentiment changes. So you've got to be prepared to invest in these growth assets for the long haul. So that all comes down to your overall investment objectives, what you're trying to achieve.
Yep.
Before you actually fall down into the strategic asset allocation of your portfolio.
Okay.
That's my only comment.
Thank you. I would totally concur. I did some work a number of years ago with a council that had a significant asset investment, and they have their challenges. It's not you got to be very strategic about your investments and and why you're holding it and what you want to achieve with it.
Yep.
Did I have your hand?
It's no different to us, Chair, looking at our little Kiwi saver funds at the moment and seeing whether you were a risk taker or whether you were risk conservative to see how much it's dropped over the last month or so.
Yep. Right. BJ.
Yeah, Philip, I was just going to make the same point. As long as there's a clear policy direction about what the end game is, what the what the goal is to achieve, and then following that, of course, what those funds may or may not be used for. And I think probably the ethical approach as to which investment a council invests in will determine not just the risk appetite for the council, but also the ethics around it from a community perspective.
Absolutely. Yep. We've seen many a council make a wrong investment decision over a long period of time if you go back in history. Right. Any further discussion on our Treasury management policy? So I see none. So if we go back to the recommendation on page 433. And we're basically saying we're recommending to council that we adopt the changes. And can I just add in there probably that including minor changes made today, that clarification. If we can have a mover for that, please. Thank you, BJ. Seconded, Tanya. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Now I noticed we've been going an hour and a half. Do people want a 5-minute stretch of the leg, and we reconvene in at 3:41 according to my computer? Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you. Good. Nice to see you, Brett. All the best. I trust everyone likes my appropriate background for Masterton District Council.
I was just hoping that that wasn't your beach house, Philip, actually.
No, I can show you
the background.
I could, what, that I'm currently there? No, yeah, no, it's not.
I was going to say, did you get a permit for that? Because it's quite high.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, when we have our workshop, I'll show you some photos of what I was doing to my beach house. Oh, we've got a quorum of 4. We can. Oh, right. David's back with us. Right. Shall we reconvene? We've got a quorum. Right. So, next item on the agenda is the 9 months financial report to 31st of March. Mr. Paris.
Yes, thank you, Chair. 9 months seems a long time ago because it finished just when we went into lockdown. So the financial result for that period of time was business as usual for the council. Pretty much it was like 1 week where COVID-19 was affecting our business. Year to date, the rates requirement summary, that's page 498, shows we've spent 21 million, 2.5% less than where we expected to be with the plan numbers year to date. So that translates to about $550,000 less expenditure of rates than we had planned to. The next question is, does that translate to a year-end forecast of that much surplus? I've done some high-level estimates. I'm working on some more detailed ones at the moment, but not at the moment. High level indicates that a lot of that surplus will be lost through the COVID-19 period, where we have less revenue from some of our trading operations, the Morley Park, building consents, waste transfer station parking meters. But the prediction is that we will still come in with a break even. We won't overspend the rates income that we had for the year. By year end, we won't have much surplus, but we won't be in deficit either. Based on a current level of information that I have at hand, and that includes not having penalty income on the instalment that's due today. Any unspent funding on projects that we can't complete during the year, we're projecting to carry forward. So things like roading, in particular, where there's some renewals expenditure and there's some maintenance work, where a month or 6 weeks where our contractors weren't able to get out there and finish the job, we will carry that project forward, carry the funding forward, and pay for it next year. So it might end up being a surplus or an underspend during the year, but the funding that we've rated for in the current year, we will carry forward and spend it next year. As far as the statement of revenue and expenditure goes, on page 497, there's an accounting surplus there. It's better than it's 1.7 million better than the planned figure year to date, and there's 3 main reasons for that. More NZTA subsidies, and higher financial contributions, and lower personnel costs. All of those contribute to having a better accounting position year to date, and that won't change by year end. Financial contributions are running well ahead of plan. NZTA subsidies, we have been able to gain a subsidy on Solway Crescent roading work that we didn't budget for, so it becomes a benefit. Otherwise, we would have been drawing on our roading contribution reserve for that job. In the statement of capital expenditure year to date, 44% of the capital program has been spent by 9 months to date, and roading work is well underway through February and March to look at the full year completing it. The prediction at the moment is 66% of the total program will be completed by the end of June, and that's the big things that aren't being spent are rec centre and not rec centre, civic centre, the civic centre project, and the town centre project, where we had quite large capital sums allowed for those projects, and won't be spent. A number of others as well. All of the detail is in the report, and welcome to answer questions on that. Brent's got a question, because I was going to go on to rates receivables, but if happy to take questions in the meantime.
Yeah, David, sorry, through you, Philip, just a quick one. In regards to the contracts, obviously, that and work that couldn't be completed, is there a penalty that is due to the company for non-completion of work? And if there is, has that fee been waived due to the COVID-19 impact?
David Hopman's probably the best person to answer that.
Yeah, you're getting into the tricky area of contractual law and what a force majeure is called. And to be completely frank, because this was an event that was outside the foreseeable future under these contracts, both for delivery of services and for our operational contracts, the contractor can claim costs for them not being able to do the work. They don't qualify for penalties because they're out, because they can't do the work because of the shutdown, and they can also claim. So we've been working through those claims. That, to be fair, they've been they've been pretty reasonable in how they've been approaching that, and we've been pretty positive on making sure that our companies, which are generally the local suppliers, have been able to keep their cash flow going. But no, we haven't had the ability to inflict penalties on our contractors because of the nature of the delays. Hope that answers your question.
Does, David, thank you.
Tina?
I just noticed there's a bit of a blowout in the library. Is that what we've been told up till now, or is that another 45k on top of the blowout that we'd already had?
Are you looking at a specific page?
Oh yeah, sorry. On page 4, a summary statement of capital expenditure, and it's the library and archive. So,
David,
it's just been such
David,
a problem.
I think the answer is that all of this has been forecast. We had the and reported. We had the additional sum approved, which was a bit beyond plan for the Library Learning Centre, but we also had the some of the earthquake strengthening, I think, within this period as well. So we've reported on that regularly to my recollection. Sorry,
okay, I couldn't remember the figures, and it just Yeah, I couldn't remember the figures, and it just looked a little bit more than what I remembered it being. That was all.
Thank you, Kath. You're correct. Sorry, I'm having IT problems bringing up my paper. I am with you.
Okay, I will go to the page 496 and just speak to the rates receivable. Somehow the graph managed to get a blue background and makes it a little bit harder to read. But you'll see that the most recent quarter, we haven't dropped off in receivables as quickly as we have in other third quarters. We have reduced our previous year arrears still, so that's only 8.4% of the opening balance for the year. So we've and better than the 9.7 from last year, but our collection of the current year is up from to 729,000 outstanding. Nothing to be alarmed at in that picture. And since the 1st of April through till yesterday, the collection of rates is tracking very similar to the last financial year, 2019, for that same period. Today's been the last day of the rates instalment due. We would normally take around $1.6 million on the last day of rates. And there's no indication at the moment that all the days up to here is any different than last year. So that's looking very positive in terms of people still paying their rates. And I didn't have any other comments to make, and happy to take questions on any of the detail in the report.
Thank you, David. Any questions? No questions? Oh, Lynn.
Sorry, is this on the capital pages as well, David?
Any of the financials.
Okay. I just had a question, and really it's maybe for David. It just sparked the old pond decommission, page 513 for Homebush. We're still awaiting consent. It's been a long time. Is there some issues with it, or is it just that's the time that it takes?
No, the issue there is now with us. We have discussed with GW, and we were looking at lodging a consent in March. We've prepared that. It's under, but we haven't lodged it, mainly because it's been put on the back burner in the last couple of months. So that is ready to go, and we've had very positive feedback from GW that they're comfortable with it. It's now sitting with us to lodge it. So and that has to come back through the council on the direction that we want to go. So yeah, to be fair, it hasn't been a priority given the last couple of months for me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. H. All right. Any further questions on the financial statements? If not, can I have a mover for the recommendation on 493, please? Thank you, Tina. Seconded. Thank you, BJ. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Carry. Any of those against? Carried. Non-financial performance. Angela Jane, welcome. And this is going to get confusing. I've got two AJs in front of me, Andrea Jackson and Angela Jane.
Philip, I'm not called AJ at this council. That was at another council.
Yeah, I know. Do I tell the committee members that I've actually known you in two other councils? Was that too much information?
I know. They need to learn about the past. Philip helped me out many, many moons ago when the finance manager, who was my sole accountant at a council, left us in the middle of an LTP. And we hired in Philip to help us with talking to the auditors and get us over our audit for the long-term plan. So it must be 20 years ago, Philip.
Not quite. It seems an awful long time. It was actually would have been the 2009 LTP.
Oh, that's good. So to the third quarter report.
Yep.
Obviously, I haven't been here particularly long at Masterton, but I see most of the SLT is still here. And so if you have any questions on the specific activities, we can direct those questions through to the SLT member that they belong to.
So, okay, so, all right. Tina, any questions?
It's just on the, oh God, I'm really struggling. Ooh. Sorry, the joys of trying to split screens. Where are we? Sorry about this, guys.
No problem. We understand.
521, it's the customer service requests. This has always been a bit of a bane for me. And I'm just wondering, in terms of that, do we need some more clarity around what are the non-urgent requests that are actually causing us the grief so that we're not meeting our targets? Because we don't seem to be getting any better. We seem to be getting slightly worse. So I was just wondering from Kath and probably Angela, are we reporting this in the best way possible for us to understand? And is this a resourcing issue? I just want to get a little bit more clarity around that.
I might be able to help you there. We've had a number of discussions internally over the years on this. The classification of urgent and non-urgent is related to our contractual conditions with our contractor. That they have contractual obligations to meet the urgent requirements. The non-urgent requirements don't have quite the same issue, because a lot of those requests turn into requests like, can I have a speed limit reduction at the front of my house? Why isn't there a can we modify the traffic control speed limits? Those sort of questions get caught up in our definition of non-urgent, and those are the ones that get audited. And so from an auditor's perspective, every inquiry is now an urgent or a non-urgent, and we don't have the ability to find a third category, which is a long-term sort of issue. So what we will be doing is looking at how we measure, and in the next LTP, one of our performance criteria will be looking at how we actually define what those non-urgent are. So as I said, a lot of them are questions that do take longer than 5 days or 10 days to actually address, because they are a long-term sort of a process. And so they get caught up in this, we haven't addressed them within it. So what I can say is we will be looking at that definition, but the auditors have their opinions too.
Well, I'm not that fussed on them today, but still. You know, it just keeps going. It's getting a little worse, a little bit worse, and a little bit worse. And I think because there's no clarity around the picture. You're exactly what you said. And if we can simplify it or give us some more understanding of that, because I suspect it's not as big a performance issue as it's actually starting to look like it's developing into.
Those are very valid points, Councillor Nixon. For some reason, Marsden District Council has had a history of a plethora of KPIs in its LTP. They were streamlined last time in the reduction. There's a whole bunch of things perhaps that are good operational management tools that we should be having reported, and then there's that governance oversight about, are you meeting your strategic objectives? And those are the KPIs that you should have associated in your measures for your LTP, so that you can exercise that governance, intelligence monitoring, and then there's the management monitoring that needs to happen to look at the themes or the recidivist, whether they're inquiries or areas of concern. So we will definitely be looking at this, and they do relate also to the asset management plans and things too, in terms of the tie-through. So we will be looking at this with fresh eyes next time.
Okay. Any other questions on the non-financial performance measures? In that case, can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 518? Thank you, Councillor Tim. Seconded, Councillor T. Oh, Tim, having a bad day. Tanya. I think Tanya got there first. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Right. Mr. Paris, you're having a long day as well. Finance update. He's gone blank on. Oh, he's back again. Right.
Yeah. It was a long week. A long week writing the reports as well, Chair.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring together a few things that are happening in the finance area in this report for the committee's information. One is rating valuations. One is LGFA changes, which we may have to pass a resolution on later next month before a special AGM, and insurance and the upcoming renewal. Rating valuations rely on market information, and COVID-19 has meant house sales and therefore market information on what a property is worth has been disrupted, and the valuers need evidence of what the market is, and if that evidence isn't available, then they can't produce a new valuation for us for the 30th of September. The delivery of those new values that we will set our rates on in the following financial year is due in December, and there is a possibility that it could be delayed. But Quotable Value have indicated that they believe they have the systems to capture the information and produce the revaluation and have it audited and pass an audit. And the OVG, the Office of the Valuer General, is quite pedantic about the level of information and quality of the information that they gather to base their valuations and the market information. The other item was the rating valuation contract with Quotable Value, and the renewal of that contract, and the offer of Quotable Value to have a 0% change in the fee for valuations. It's a joint contract with the three councils, and yeah, that's they're acting responsibly from their point of view, and not increasing the cost to us. On the LGFA, the changes that are being proposed are in relation to large councils with high levels of debt, and they're looking to increase from 250 to 280% of operating revenue. That's well outside this council's needs, but certainly from the LGFA's point of view, some of their biggest customers, those councils like Auckland and Tauranga, and the changes that are being proposed will assist those councils, and we should be supporting them as a shareholder of the LGFA. And insurance, we're looking at a 5% increase in premiums for our material damage policies, That's the market indications. But for our professional indemnity and liability policies, it's a 50% increase. So that's going from around 50,000 to 75,000 next financial year. And the reasons are that local government is not seen as a good risk when it comes to indemnity and liability insurance. There are many claims out there. There's more and more claims being brought against councils, or councils being pulled into legal actions where we have a regulatory requirement, and we end up being the last man standing. And so the insurers have to defend councils, and that's flowing back to the premiums that the councils are paying going up. And yeah, that's the highlights of that information report.
Thank you, David. Any questions of David? Pina?
Yeah, I see that you're getting some, obviously some economies of scale on the insurance premiums with the 3 Wairarapa councils. Is there any chance of taking that wider into the Wellington region, or councils of similar sizes, or across New Zealand under LG to get some sort of economies of scale around that? Or does that work?
It does work for the disaster insurance. We're a member of the LAP scheme, and there's 22 councils spread across the country.
Yep.
Mostly smaller councils, and insurers look at the asset values and the spread of the risk. So if there's an earthquake in one region, it doesn't affect all of the assets that are insured, and insurers like that. But for material damage on buildings, Wellington is a high risk area, and they pay higher premiums because of it. So we don't want to join Wellington Council area for lumping our insurance policies. Yeah, the Wairarapa can stand alone and is able to be marketed to the insurance industry as a distinct area.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn?
David, just a query on QV, and you've got in the report that there's little choice of other providers. I mean, it's been years since I've been involved in that, but is there no other players in the market, even outside of the Wellington region?
Philip may have more information, but I know there's one in Waikato who did bid for the contract when we put it to tender, I think 6 years ago. They don't have a presence in Wellington and need to establish in the Wellington region. And we have jointly put it out as a Wellington region contract in the past.
Can I just comment on that? There is another provider. They are actually in the Bay of Plenty as well. However, the valuation regulations require the valuer to have a presence within the geographical area. So what, David is quite right. So they would actually need to, if they wanted to do some of the Wairarapa councils, they would have to establish a presence in the area, which they could actually set up an office in Wellington. But certainly they were involved in the Auckland Council revaluation 3 years ago, and they actually had to set up an office in Auckland to actually undertake that valuation. So that's part of the criteria. When we go into confidential, I'll give you some feedback on their latest performance.
I know that was an issue when what were they used to be called?
Oh no, this is another.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the changes when.
A number of years ago. Yes, that was. Yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience for a lot of people.
But I'm really interested to see the Office of the Valuer General is pushing for this different information to be collected. And if that's what if I'm reading that right, to lift the bar and DVR quality expectations. So is that all new information that they'll be collecting, David?
It's not necessarily new, but it is more evidence for the valuation. So a farm valuation, for example, they want to know what the water supply is, if it's irrigated, if it's got a water race through it, and yeah, clearly that affects the value. So if they haven't recorded that information on their last inspection, then they need to go out and capture it. So yeah, that's the sort of increasing the quality of the information for every property.
Got two. Yep.
I just wanted to say about on page 534 regarding risks not insured. Really good to see that you got cyber risks up there. I'm looking forward to seeing the options around that as well as the pandemic related insurance. So I'm very interested. So thank you.
Yeah, we will come back with more information around the cyber risks. It is a hard one to define what the loss is and how it can be attributed, so that an insurance company actually pays out. So there's no point in having an insurance policy if the what you're insuring isn't well enough defined and you don't end up benefiting from it. So that's where our hesitancy to date has been around going down the cyber risk insurance policies. And pandemic one was a current topic that is the question asked: has anyone actually insured themselves against the costs of the pandemic? And as you saw, Wimbledon has managed to have event insurance that they can claim on, but one of the few, I think. But in future, if people see pandemic as a risk that they think could lose their money, then an insurance company will give them a quote for a policy that insures them against it. The cost of that policy might have to be weighed up against the level of risk.
I just aware of that in New Zealand there was a broker who did offer childcare loss of profits as a result of a pandemic. My understanding that won't be offered again next year.
Yeah. So
right, they've taken a rather large hit on it. They didn't expect they'd ever had to pay out on it, and they have. So, and that's the problem: is an insurer will only take, well, they'll, it comes out how much is it actually going to cost to insure against a pandemic. That's BJ.
David, just one question around QV. With the requirement now to have a lot more information provided or a lot more information sourced, there's a lot of non-consented council work that goes on in private dwellings. If we have an idea that there is a lot of that going on, which ultimately could reflect in a different value for one's property, would that be something in the future you could foresee that a lot more private dwelling visits will then have to be conducted, at which point the cost of actually putting this through will rise significantly?
Yeah, it is something that in setting the price for the valuation contract, they base it on doing so many property visits and so many objections that are placed after the valuations are put out. They will look at a 2 or 3% objection rate. So every property owner has the ability to say, I think you got it wrong, and they're required to go and actually have a look at the property and assess that, whatever those improvements are that they might have done that they think has enhanced the value of their property more than what maybe the market desktop exercise has done. and they're not coming and looking at what you've done. So the objection process allows them to have that assessed. And yeah, it's the price we pay doesn't change.
Yeah, no, I just wonder in the future, David, if they are seeking more information, then the amount of visits that they make may per property may actually go up, which means the compliance costs will come up, which means our costs will go up. And I don't know anyone that would argue their property value unless they're trying to sell if they want an increase. So yeah.
Yeah, and it is a rating valuation. It's done for the purposes of setting rates, and it's not necessarily their market value at any other time than the date that it's set.
Yep.
Right. Any other questions? I've just got one, David. In terms of the LGFA, by increasing those limits for those councils who've got a credit rating of A equivalent or higher, does that, by actually increasing their capacity to borrow, does that put any risk on LGFA and therefore council as a guarantor?
Yes. The advice to date has been that it's a very minor increase in risk, and it's spread across all of the investors in the LGFA, including the government. We are awaiting some advice that the Shareholders Council have asked for on this policy, just to assure ourselves that it's not increasing our risk any more than is reasonable.
Okay.
I don't think you can say it won't increase the risk, but it's what's prudent and what's needed for the country, really, for those councils to be able to get on with the recovery process.
Yep. Okay. All right. Any further questions of David on the finance update? Thank you, David. Can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 530? Thank you. I've got two. I've got three. Harriet, you can take your pick. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Right. Next item, NZTA investment audit update. The other David. Thank you, David Paris, for your spirited bidding. And you can be replaced with Mr. Hopman.
You're having trouble with names today, Chair.
I am. It's.
Shall be referred to as the Hoff from now on. You know that.
The hop. The hop would be good, wouldn't it? The Hoff or the hop, right?
I think for the purposes of live streaming, we're quite looking forward to the Hoff turning up.
That probably could be arranged, actually, but he might not be moving. We could. Right. Oh, he's gone quiet on us.
Sorry. My apologies. I was on a call to my response manager. My other job.
You got two jobs, have you? Oh dear.
I'm using this opportunity to do other stuff, but sorry, I missed the question.
There hasn't been one, David.
There hasn't been, but I assume you're going to answer any questions on the NZTA investment audit. We'll take the report as read.
Yes, I am.
Lynn's got a question, I believe, then followed by Councillor. Oh, no.
Okay, I'm pleased to see that there's actions and status against from our report last year from NZTA, from their investment audit report. The first one around the AMP and the commitment to producing one that will spell out, etc., etc. So, David, it's through the chair. Is somebody going to peer review that? I mean, I know that NZTA, when they have the audit again, will be looking at it. But prior to that, given the significance of our roading network, I just wondered whether that AMP should be peer reviewed.
Yeah, my understanding is we're going to peer review all our AMPs. So that was part of the policy position that we were doing. So you're right, these will be audited by Audit New Zealand. They'll be part of their audit process, and NZTA will have to approve them. So they'll be auditing them and we'll be peer reviewing them as well. So yes.
So just a follow-up question, Chair. So we asked that the AMPs be peer reviewed before the last LTP. Was the roading AMP peer reviewed then?
That's 3 years ago you're referring to.
Yes.
I can't recall, to be honest. I think it was just audited. No, I don't think we peer reviewed all the AMPs.
Okay, that supports my thinking as well. I think we just did the waters, but yeah, okay. So that's great then that the roading one be included for peer review this time, given the significance of our roading network. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. So can I have you got off easy on that one. You should actually stay on the phone longer, David H. Right. Right.
Happy to move.
You're happy to move. Thank you. Thank you, BJ. I think you beat Councillor Nixon by a finger. All those in favour of the report, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Right. Health and safety. I would imagine a bit of work's gone on to this, Kate, in the last period of time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kia ora koutou. I'm really pleased to present the health and safety report for the third quarter. Just draw your attention to the fact that this report is from January to the 31st of March. So obviously a lot has changed since the 31st of March. So I will take the report as read, but I would like to highlight a few points in the report and then open up for questions if I may. So as per the executive summary, in January, through the Health and Safety Committee, the COVID-19 pandemic became an issue that was being watched and was raised as a potential risk. Obviously, things have developed a lot since then, and there has been a really significant focus and an increasing focus on COVID-19 and this health and safety impacts, not only on our workers, but also on our customers. And so we have been really busy across the business and very focused on ensuring that our buildings and premises and facilities have been stood up appropriately and in a safe way for our people and for our customers. You'll see under point 5 that no change, the traffic light ratings have occurred this quarter. And you'll see under section 7 that the diagram has now been updated to include COVID-19 as a key factor for consideration in terms of top health and safety risks organisation-wide. Under our top 6 health and safety risk organisation-wide, one of the other things I wanted to draw your attention to under the section dealing with customers was in relation to ensuring that our people are prepared to support our customers. The provider that we've used previously in terms of coaching our people to deal with conflict and conflict resolution has provided us with an online tool that we can roll out to staff to just refresh them on some of the principles of dealing with our customers in the coming months as maybe they face more pressure as a result of what's going to be happening in terms of any potential economic recession. So I think that that's going to be, it's a really great proactive tool that we are about to roll out to the business. And then just under the lead indicators section, I just wanted to highlight that 2 meetings were held during the quarter to March 31st. But since then, our health and safety team has been really engaged and bolstered. So not only have we extended our membership to include people from every part of the business, we've even got sort of deputies, if you like, from across the business, and we're meeting weekly, and we are discussing all things health and safety on a weekly basis. So I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Kate? No questions. I've got one. One of the risks for health and safety that I'm observing is, how do you manage workload in an unsupervised environment, and also when someone's sitting at their computer all day at the dining room table or in their garage, and I have seen both over this period, how do you ensure that those are not causing harm?
So our leadership team did some really fantastic comms at the beginning of the lockdown period, and have followed up just in and around what working from home looks like, and safe practices and things to remember to ensure that your desk setup is appropriate. The other thing that we did very early on was just developed a very basic template that was rolled out as a vehicle for discussion with staff about their capacity and their ability to actually get work done from home. Because it's not just about what you can do from home in terms of your setup or Wi-Fi. It's also about those of us that had young children calling all over us and maybe no care, and they weren't at school and kindy and things like that. So I'm really pleased to be able to answer your question and say that our leadership team has been extremely proactive in our communications and in that two-way feedback with our staff to ensure that people's needs are being met. And we did things like shift work patterns for people. We, where we needed to, we allowed, enabled staff to make use of toil or annual leave, just to kind of take the pressure off a little bit. From a personal perspective, I changed my work pattern a little bit so that I could spend some time with the kids and do some homeschooling in the morning. That just meant that after they were in bed at night, I was able to kind of plug away at the computer. Obviously, we have all sorts of different staff and different roles. And so that wasn't always going to be, we weren't going to be able to do that for all of our customer facing staff. But I think on the whole, the only issues that we really experienced in terms of people not being able to get work done was really in and around Wi-Fi capability.
Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Kia ora, Tero.
Kia ora, Kate. Thank you for that. Just also understanding within this new environment now with workload and with working at home, is there an appetite to support, continuing that if we are wanting to keep our children at home? Possibly, I would like to see us being flexible in that space as well to adjust. I think it's really important, considering some people have actually got some real anxiety about, reintegrating back into the work.
That's a really, really good point, and one that I'm really happy to talk about. We were just having conversations about this yesterday. So we, at a leadership level, across the wider leadership team, across the organisation, I was just reminding people that there are a lot of people that are very excited to be able to go back to work or to be able to get back out into the community, and that we shouldn't be using those people as our barometer of how people are feeling, because actually there is still a little bit of angst and apprehension about going out into public spaces, about our children going back into these, classrooms, even if there are physical distancing sort of mechanisms in place. I mean, I have a 2.5-year-old, and you're not keeping him off anyone when he goes to kindy. So it's about, and listen, I really have to sing the praises again of our leadership team and the comms that have come out. And that's been a joint effort led by Kath. And we've been very, very clear from the outset that we were going to make every change in alert level work for the individual. And that's been true through the whole period. As things have changed, we have worked to, work with our people to make sure that they are comfortable coming back to work or working from home, and that their well-being, is being looked after. So we're all over it.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because you've got some, really motivated people who really want to come back into that space again, and then it's kind of weighed up against the anxiety on the other side of things. So I just, I commend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well done, Kath. Thank you, as Chief Executive. Any other questions? In that case, can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 542? Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, BJ. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Last item in open is exceptions to our procurement policy. Thank you, Andrea, for this report. Take it as read. Are there any questions? Lynn?
Thank you. Just through the chair, I understand that there may be likely to be only one supplier that has the sorry, I'm just looking for the wording, a sole supplier, given the playground history. But I just think it's a question to whether we have teased this out. So under our local campaign and given COVID, have staff approached any of our very experienced engineering companies with the playground standards to see whether they could do something? So I just want to be sure that we've investigated whether we have that ability anywhere locally to do this, because this is an assumption, and I don't know whether it's in the report. I'm assuming that that person isn't the company isn't local. If I'm wrong, please tell me so.
I'll invite AJ to comment, but this was actually done pre COVID. This was coming into, this is from the last period. And we did consider what the trade-offs were, and even at that time, between tendering work locally and actually being able to get on and get the Flying Fox in a position to be hopefully put into commission as soon as possible with the return to the parks and things. We know it's a beloved piece of equipment. But Andrea, do you have any other comments?
Just to reiterate your point, Kath, and Lynn, we did have conversations with local contractors, and because of the specialised nature of the playground standard, a number of them weren't in a position or wanting to even provide quotes for some of the work. So you'll have some additional papers coming about additional playground equipment, and they weren't in that work. But I will confirm that and come back to you, Lynn. But that was my understanding through our contractor.
That's fine, as long as we've tried to source it locally, and if there's nobody willing to do the work, that's fine. If we can just confirm that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. BJ, did you have a query?
Yeah, probably just to follow up to Lynn. I know the work was done, and great job, obviously, getting that done prior to all of this. I just wonder whether that local appetite, given the recent few months, may be somewhat different. I don't want to necessarily delay the process, but at a cost estimated of $53,000, I wonder how beloved the Flying Fox really is.
So that's a really good point, and it's one that we are bringing back social procurement options to you as well. I have a slightly different view, I guess, which is we also need to support those that support us. So when the times are good and a bunch of people say, I'm not interested in doing work for council because I can make my money somewhere else, that is also a signal that gets rebounded the other way. So we want to ensure, because I'm pretty sure that you know, if we went out again now to all the people that said no, they'd give it a go, but they might not be able to meet the standards that were in place that they were concerned about at that time, if that meant that they could cash flow their business. So we saw this previously, post GFC. We've seen it all throughout. When the times get good, we don't get any tenderers for our work. So I think this is more our opportunity to look at supporting local, supporting social procurement, but doing it on a partnership basis. So it's not just when things are difficult for them, but we get to share some of the upside, I guess, of that partnership. Yeah. That's what we as staff are trying to aim for. Yeah.
Yep. No. Well. Okay. Well noted, Kath. I certainly take your point there.
Okay. Any further discussion, Councillor Nixon?
Yeah, just I'm curious, who administers the playground standards now?
I'll get Andrea to come in on that because I actually don't know.
Not sure who would administer them, but as part of our contract, recreational services ensure that we meet the playground standard. And I'm sure, well, if I think about pool water standards, that's a New Zealand standard that's administered. I'm not sure. I'd have to confirm with you, Tina. It's part of our contract to meet standards. And I just wanted to touch on a point you made, Kath. This project's taken quite a while to find someone that was able to do the work. I've actually penciled it in for around about the 15th of June, depending on weather conditions. So we're quite keen to just push on with that, and just to let you know that there will be work and we need to communicate that out to our community as well. Tina, I will come back to you with the response to that.
There is a reason I'm asking. I mean, I would really be interested to know what the accident rate on that thing's been since 1994. And the reason I say that is actually I was a playground and flying fox auditor in Otago and Southland for ACC. My pocket
I asked for a declaration of interest at the beginning of the meeting. I didn't hear that one.
I think it's quite historical.
That's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's always looked to me like being built like a brick proverbial. So I was just really curious as to has there been any accidents? What is actually really wrong with it, and who is actually administering this stuff anymore? And are we rollicking along into actually fixing something that may actually not need to be fixed? So I was just really curious as to which department actually now had the responsibility for those standards.
Yeah, so this work came out of an audit we undertook pre our contract negotiations last contract, and so we've got about a 5-year program of improvements that we need a lot across the portfolio, and this is one of those things. But I would be really keen to get you on the Flying Fox, Tina, and to use your skills and expertise.
A quantitative survey of 11 elected members on the Flying Fox may give you the results you're after.
Oh, come on, it's the Flying Fox, it's an icon, come on.
Right.
That's why with BG, I've been on that, or I haven't been on it. I had my grandkids down there on 2 different days. That Flying Fox is loved by all kids, and it's great to see them.
Is it as popular as a flamingo?
Don't know about that.
Right, okay. Back on track, please, team. Right, so any further discussion, any questions relating to the report? Not necessarily to the putting who's going to go on the Flying Fox next. So if no further questions, can I have a mover for the recommendation, please, on page 551? I'll move it. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Nixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Right, now that concludes the open part of the business. Now, needing advice from Harriet, do we move? We need to move in this meeting to move into public excluded?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'll have a move. I'll move. Seconded. I think we've got three or four hands up there. You can take your pick, Harriet, and give you something more to do. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Right, we'll see you all soon. I think we're going to need to change Zoom meetings.
This will end this meeting.
Yes? Yep.
I was just going to suggest maybe a 5-minute toilet comfort.
Okay, another 5-minute break. Absolutely. We'll reconvene at 4:50. I'll give you a bit